Sukrinam Arjuna Artho Jignasur Artharti Jnani Cha Bharata Shabha. Translation. O best among the Bharatas, Arjuna, 4 kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Text 17. Tesham jnanena cha yukta eka bhakti vishishyate priyo hi jnanino tatam aham sacha mama priya. Translation. Of these, the wise one who is in full knowledge in union with me through pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. Text 18. Udara sarva evaite jnani tvatmaiva me matam ashtita sahi yuktatma mam evan uttamam gatim. Translation. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider verily to dwell in me. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he attains me. Text 19. Bahunam jananam ante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudurblabha. Translation. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Text 20. Kamastai hita jnanam prapadyante nyadevata tam niyamam astaya prakritya niyatasvayam. Translation. Those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Text 21. Yo yam yam tanum bhakta shraddhaya chitam ichyati tasya chalam shraddham tam eva vidadyam yaham. Translation. I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship the demigods, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to some particular deity. Text 22. Sataya shraddhaya yuktas tasya radhanam ihate labhate cha tata kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan. Translation. Endowed with such a faith, he seeks favors of a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. Text 23. Antavatu phalam tesham tadbhavant yalpa medhasam devan deva yajo yanti mad bhakta yanti mam api. Translation. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. Text 24. Avyaktam vyaktim apanam manyante mam abudhya param bhavam ashananto mam vayam anutamam. Translation. Unintelligent men who know me not think that I have assumed this form and personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is changeless and supreme. Text 25, final text. Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavita mudhuyam abhijananti lokamam ajam avyayam. Translation. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, Yoga Maya. And so the deluded world knows me not, who am unborn and infallible. I'd like to read, go back to maybe text 21 and read a translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. I am in everyone's heart as the supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship the demigods, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to some particular deity. Purport. God has given independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facilities to such persons. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, He does not interfere with their independence, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. Some may ask why the all-powerful God gives facilities to the living entities for enjoying this material world and so lets them fall into the trap of the illusory energy. The answer is that if the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul, does not give such facilities, then there is no meaning to independence. Therefore, He gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes. But His ultimate instruction we find in the Bhagavad-gita. Man should give up all other engagements and fully surrender unto Him. That will make man happy. Both the living entity and the demigods are subordinate to the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire, nor can the demigod bestow any benediction without the supreme will. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, persons who are distressed in the material world go to the demigods as they are advised in the Vedic literature. A person wanting some particular thing may worship such and such a demigod. For example, a diseased person is recommended to worship the sun god. A person wanting education may worship the goddess of learning, Saraswati. And a person wanting a beautiful wife may worship the goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. In this way, there are recommendations in the Shastras, Vedic scriptures, for different modes of worship of different demigods. And because a particular living entity wants to enjoy a particular material facility, the Lord inspires him with a strong desire to achieve that benediction from that particular demigod. And so he successfully receives the benediction. The particular mode of the devotional attitude of the living entity toward a particular type of demigod is also arranged by the Supreme Lord. The demigods cannot infuse the living entities with such an affinity, but because He is the Supreme Lord or the Supersoul who is present in the heart of all living entities, Krishna gives impetus to man to worship certain demigods. The demigods are actually different parts of the universal body of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they have no independence. In the Vedic literature, Taittiriya Upanishad, first Anuvaka, it is stated, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Supersoul, is also present within the heart of the demigod. Therefore, he ranges through the demigod to fulfill the desire of the living entity. But both the demigod and the living entity are dependent on the Supreme Will. They are not independent. So it is said, people sometimes in the worship in the mode of goodness mixed with passion might worship the sun god, and the mode of goodness mixed with ignorance, they might worship, and then if it's in they might worship Ganesh, and if they're in the mode of passion mixed with ignorance, they might worship Durga. And then if they're in the mode of ignorance, they might worship Shiva. But it's becoming clear that it's being made clear that people who worship the demigods for something, it's temporary. Just like everything, the demigods, it's temporary. It's not permanent, because the demigods are living entities, and they're not the supreme living entity. And so it's a temporary position. They have a very elevated position because of the levels of high faith. They've gotten this position. There's 330 million demigods. And it is said that they're controlling so many things that we are not aware of, even the flickering of the eyelids and things like that. But they still have to take, it's still temporary. And so the boons that they can grant are temporary. And so if one wants permanence, which we all do, we're all hankering after permanent, real, permanent, no death, no birth, no duality of things. We're all looking for permanent results, because what is the point of a temporary, they talk about bubblegum pop, or bubblegum it loses its flavor very quickly. And so even to attain, if you worship the demigods, you might take birth on the planet of a demigod, but there's suffering, because one has to leave the body, one has to eventually die. And so we're looking, the soul is naturally looking for that place where there is no death, which is going back home, back to Godhead, going to Krishna's abode. If we can become purified enough to go back. And so that is what we're looking for. And he speaks of 4 types of devotees, 4 types of people who render devotional service, and also 4 types of people that do not surrender unto the Lord. And there's 8,400,000 species, and there's 400,000 types of just humans. And so there's many. He's boiled it down into these 4 kinds that don't surrender, and the 4 kinds that do. And of the 4 kinds that do, the topmost is the Jnani, or the Jnana Mishra Bhakta, that surrenders unto the Lord and doesn't want anything in return, is doing it selflessly, versus the other 3 kinds that do surrender are still loved dearly by the Lord, but they're karma Mishra Bhaktas, and they are wanting some results. And even of these Jnanis, these Jnana Mishra Bhaktas, even they can be elevated to bhakta, to pure bhakti. And so Lord Krishna says, when one is a Jnani and in full knowledge of me, I hold him very dear as myself. And so Krishna loves his devotees very much. It's overwhelming how much he loves his devotees, and he's just asking us to work on coming home back to Godhead. And one Janma karma chime divyam evam yo veti tatvataha chatvadeham pranarjanma neti mam etiso Arjuna. One who remembers the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities is not, upon leaving the body, take birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. And so of these 4 kinds of devotees that do not surrender, you've got number 1, the mudhas. The mudhas work very hard and don't have time to make spiritual advancement, and they're addicted to material gains, and they require a lot of work, and they only get a small few drops of juice out of all the work that they're putting in. So those are the mudhas, who are grossly foolish. And then the second kind, the naradamas, and they are practicing devotional service for some time, but they later decide that it's impractical for them for achieving the aims of life, and they whimsically discard it. So Naradama discards this devotional service that they've encountered. And then Mayaya Parita Jnanis consider Krishna just to be another human being, often following the Sankhya philosophy, and they think that creation is enacted somehow by material nature, thinking that maybe life comes from chemicals, or thinking all these thoughts of, that we come, that our ancestors are monkeys maybe, and if that's true, then why are monkeys still here? Why haven't they completely evolved? And often poets and scientists, and sometimes considered philosophers, these are Maya ya Parita Gyanis, considering that Krishna is just another human being. For some reason, they have a hard time wrapping their mind around that. But if we can be a human being, why can't Krishna descend in a human form, and enact his pastimes here for the pleasure of the devotees, and in Vrindavan and Mathura and Dwarka? And why, if he's supreme, they think maybe that the Brahma Jyoti is above, like maybe Krishna came from that, that's the highest, some sort of effulgence, or some sort of nothingness, some sort of formless void, or some sort of formless ether. And no, but Krishna, all these scriptures around the world, a lot of the religious scriptures say we were created in his image, and so he can have form, and he can act his pastimes, but he's not material at all. His form is completely spiritual, Satchid Ananda Vigraha, full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And so it's just hard for people to even imagine that, or they may not feel like they have time to even think about such things. But we're trying to take time to think about these things, and encourage other people to think about these things and contemplate, and think about all the amazing things that Krishna did when he was here in his human form. They think that the material nature is the creator of all and the bestower of liberation. The reason that they raise hundreds of faulty arguments is because of the influence of Maya. So they're covered because they're not ready to understand. So they might be covered by Maya. And then the fourth kind is the asuras. And the asuras actually take shelter of the demoniac nature. And Jarasandha is an example of an asura that, although he had knowledge, he hated Krishna and wanted to kill him. Jarasandha was born in an unusual way. His father had wanted a son for a long time, and he had 2 wives. And somehow he got these 2 pieces of fruit. And so the father gave, Jarasandha's eventual father gave half of the fruit to one wife and half to the other wife. And both wives gave birth to like half of a child that wasn't reacting, that wasn't doing anything, a small 2 halves. And so they said, just put that in the forest. Put that in the forest, and we'll forget about that. And someone came along, and she put the 2 halves together, and the baby came to life and started crying. And so she gave it back to Jarasandha's father. And Jarasandha, he had 2 daughters, and they were both married to Kamsa. And so when Krishna killed Kamsa, Jarasandha was very disturbed, because all of a sudden his daughters did not have a husband. And so there was many battles between Krishna and Balaram and Jarasandha. And Krishna kept coming up victorious, of course. And there were so many interesting stories within those battles. And then later, even Krishna and Krishna and Bhima and Arjuna went to Jarasanda's castle much later, disguised as brahmanas, and they wanted to fight. They wanted to. He said, "Oh, I won't fight this person. I won't fight this person." So he ended up choosing that he would fight Bhima, and so he fought him for a long time, and they were exhausted. And Krishna gave Bhima a hint. He said, when someone's exhausted, if you give them a big jolt, they might pass, they might die. And so Bhima took Jarasandha on his knee and kind of broke his back like that. So that's Jarasandha. And he's an asura. So he had knowledge, but he couldn't surrender. And he was just inimical towards Krishna. And then Srila Prabhupada explains and the Bhagavad-gita explains the souls that do surrender. Like the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. Srila Prabhupada says they are not pure devotees, but they are pious. They can be elevated to pure devotional service by the association of a pure devotee. And when a pious soul turns to Krishna out of distress, he's known as Arta. Distressed pious soul is Arta. And such a person is trying to get some relief from sickness or calamity. And Gajendra is an example of an Arta, a distressed soul, who Gajendra was an elephant, and every day he would go get a lotus flower from the pond and give it to Lord Vishnu, devote it to Lord Vishnu, and then one day a crocodile out of nowhere latched on to his leg, to his elephant leg. And so he was very painful. It was very painful, and his family was around, and they were trying to help. There was nothing they could do to help. So he's crying out, and eventually they went away. And it's said that this went on. Sometimes people are saying this went on for 1,000 years. And so Gajendra is crying out to Lord Vishnu, and Vishnu heard, and Vishnu comes down on his swan carrier, and Gajendra is lifting the flower as he comes down, and then Vishnu decapitates the crocodile, and then finally Gajendra is free. So Gajendra is an example of an Arta, or distressed devotee. Number two of the ones that do surrender, Jinyasu is curious. He inquisitively approaches Krishna to understand the soul or to become self-realized. Shaunaka Rishi is an example. Number three, an Arti may want to enjoy land, money, sons, or a wife in this life or the next. But fortunately, he asks Krishna and not the demigods to supply his needs. Dhruva Maharaj is an example of an Arti. So that's a Dhruva Maharaj who he had his parents split up, and he was the son of a king, and the king father sent the mother away and remarried. And one time Dhruva was sitting on the lap of the father, and the new wife said, "Oh, you can't sit that because you weren't born of my womb. You can't sit there on the lap." And so he's very disturbed, and he went and told his mother, and he said, "What do I do?" And she said, "Well, you pray to the Supreme. I've heard people saying that you should pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead." And he says, "Where do you go?" And she said, "I've heard people go to the forest and you find the Supreme Personality of Godhead there." And he wanted revenge. And so he goes out there, and he was talking to all the animals. He said, Are you the Supreme? Are you Krishna? Are you the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And Narada Muni heard this and came down and was teaching him some things. And he just wanted a lot of land. He wanted to usurp his father's kingdom. He wanted the biggest piece of land. And And so he's meditating for a long time, meditating on Super Soul in his heart. And at one point, after a long time, Super Soul, he felt like it wasn't in his heart anymore. And so it broke his concentration, and he looked up, and there was the Supreme Personality of Godhead in front of him. And what can I do for you? You know, what would you like? And he said, gosh, I've been looking after these broken pieces of glass. I've had revenge in my heart, and I've been after these broken pieces of glass. But now that I've found you, you know, I don't want anything other than you. And so he ended up being taken on a transcendental aircraft, and he said, "Where's my mother?" And they said, "Oh, she's already there, you know, and she'll be with you." And and that shows how you can liberate the ancestors and the family members by being a devotee. And so he has the pole star, Polaris, or known as pole star. And that is the North Star, you know, that's the North Star, the only star that doesn't move. All the stars move around this one star like a chandelier, and it's quite amazing. So you can always find the North Star, and so many people have been using that to navigate for so long. And let's see here. And then Krishna here tells us, so these are all the above contain, these three are Sakama devotees, or devotees with some material desires, Sakama. Specifically, Karma Mishra Bhaktas, because they are asking Krishna to fulfill their fruitive desires. And the fourth category, Jnana Mishra Bhakta, he approaches Krishna not to have his material desires fulfilled, but to gain knowledge and thus approach liberation. Therefore, he's on the Nishkama platform. So it's said that Shukadeva Goswami and the four Kumaras are examples of this type of pious soul. And so the Jnani is best because it's free. He's free from material desires. He is called Eka Bhakti, interested only in devotional service. Krishna is using the term Jnani to refer to one who has abandoned his pursuit of jnana and has turned to bhakti. Such a Jnani loves Krishna, and Krishna loves him. And the other three are also objects of Krishna's affection because they've come to him, even if it is to have their desires satisfied. But it comes to be the Jnani comes to be considered by the Bhakta-vatsala personality of Godhead as his own self. Bhakta-vatsala means one who, how Krishna, how he loves his devotees very much. So all these three must come to the Jnani platform before they're eligible to go back to Godhead. I'd like to go to read the purport of text 24. Translation 24. Unintelligent men who know me not think that I have assumed this form and personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is changeless and supreme. Report. Those who are worshippers of demigods have been described as less intelligent persons, and hidden impersonalists are similarly described. Lord Krishna in his personal form is here speaking before Arjuna, and still, due to ignorance, impersonalists argue that the Supreme Lord ultimately has no form. Ramanu Acharya, a great devotee of the Lord in the disciplic succession from Ramanujacharya, has written two very appropriate verses in this connection. He says, quote, "My dear Lord, devotees like Vyasadeva and Narada know you to be the personality of Godhead. By understanding different Vedic literatures, one can come to know your characteristics, your form, and your activities, and one can thus understand that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But those who are in the modes of passion and ignorance, the demons, the non-devotees, cannot understand you. They are unable to understand you. However expert such non-devotees may be in discussing Vedanta and the Upanishads and other Vedic literatures, it is not possible for them to understand the personality of Godhead," end quote. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the personality of Godhead cannot be understood simply by study of the Vedanta literature. Only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord can the personality of the Supreme be known. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated that not only the worshippers of the demigods are less intelligent, but those non-devotees who are engaged in Vedanta and speculation on Vedic literature without any tinge of true Krishna consciousness are also less intelligent. And for them, it is not possible to understand God's personal nature. Persons who are under the impression that the absolute truth is impersonal are described as asuras, which means one who does not know the ultimate feature of the absolute truth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that supreme realization begins from the impersonal Brahman and then rises to the localized supersoul. But the ultimate word and the absolute truth is the personality of Godhead. Modern impersonalists are still less intelligent, for they do not even follow their great predecessor, Shankaracharya, who has specifically stated that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Impersonalists, therefore, not knowing the supreme truth, think Krishna to be only the son of Devaki and Vasudeva, or a prince, or a powerful living entity. This is also condemned in Bhagavad-gita. Quote, only the fools regard me as an ordinary person, end quote. The fact is that no one can understand Krishna without rendering devotional service and without developing Krishna consciousness. The Gita confirms this. One cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or his form, quality, or name simply by mental speculation or by discussing Vedic literature. One must understand him by devotional service. When one is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, beginning by chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then only can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Non-devotee impersonalists think that Krishna has a body made of this material nature and that all his activities, his form and everything are Maya. These impersonalists are known as Mayavadi. They do not know the ultimate truth. The 20th verse clearly states, quote, those who are blinded by lusty desires surrender unto the different demigods, end quote. It is accepted that besides the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are demigods who have their different planets. Bhagavad-gita 7:23. And the Lord also has a planet. It is also stated that the worshippers of the demigods go to different planets of the demigods, and those who are devotees of Lord Krishna go to the Krishna Loka planet. Although this is clearly stated, the foolish impersonalists still maintain that the Lord is formless and that these forms are impositions. From the study of the Gita, does it appear that the demigods and their abodes are impersonal? Clearly, neither the demigods nor Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are impersonal. They are all persons. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has his own planet, and the demigods have theirs. Therefore, the monistic contention that ultimate truth is formless and that form is imposed does not hold true. It is clearly stated here that it is not imposed. From the Gita, we can clearly understand that the forms of the demigods and the form of the Supreme Lord are simultaneously existing, and that Lord Krishna is Satchidananda, eternal, blissful knowledge. The Vedas also confirm that Supreme Absolute Truth is Anandamaya, or full of blissful pleasure, and that he is Abhyasat, by nature, the reservoir of unlimited auspicious qualities. And in the Gita, the Lord says that although he is Aja, unborn, he still appears. These are the facts that we should understand from the Gita. We cannot understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be impersonal. The imposition theory of the impersonalist monist is false as far as the statements of the Gita are concerned. It is clear herein that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Lord Krishna, has both form and personality. And so people are people who worship the demigods are giving the food to the wrong part of the body. They're picking it up with their hand. It was said that one time all the parts of the body kind of mad at the stomach. They said, gosh, the stomach's just sitting there and we do all the work. And so we'll just take the food ourselves, but it doesn't work that way. You have to give the food to the stomach. The hand gives it to the mouth, which is giving it to the stomach. And so when someone worships a demigod and doesn't know that the demigod is the servant of Lord Shri Krishna, Achyuta, who is infallible, then they're giving the food to the wrong part of the body. Sometimes the less intelligent foolishly think that the demigods can fulfill their desires more quickly and effortlessly than the Supreme Lord. And the Lord still grants the desires of the devotees, but it may take a little longer because he's also purifying them along the way. So this purification process takes some time. And so it's not always immediate. But the fruits that demigods offer their worshippers are ultimately awarded by Krishna. These people can't be liberated, though, because they did not directly approach Krishna. And as the demigods eventually perish, so do the fruits that they offer. But Srila Prabhupada mentions, however, that if the demigods are worshipped with an understanding of their position as the Lord's expansions, then the result of worshiping them is permanent. Bharat Maharaj is an example of one who worshipped the demigods as Lord Vishnu's agents and not for material rewards. So yeah, they aren't able to surrender to the Lord. Think about someone that's not even able to surrender to a police car. When the lights come on behind them, most of us are going to pull right over. But some people, depending on their situation or their consciousness, they won't even surrender to the policeman, which means that they're willing to risk their lives and others' lives and potentially end up in jail for a long time. And I encountered this just the other day when yesterday, Sunday, a lot of times we drive on 55th to get to Loose Park, and I had heard some sirens a minute before, so I was aware of something. And then there was this spot where on 55th you don't have to stop, but the north-south traffic is supposed to stop. And so I heard some sirens probably 5-7 seconds away, and so I just didn't even cross that intersection. I just kind of put in reverse, pulled back, and a high-speed chase right in front of me. They blew the stop sign, and then 3 or 4 police officers went right by. So dangerous situation. But Super Soul was giving me the intelligence to stop and to be very cautious. It just goes to show us whenever we hear those sirens, we have to pull over. We don't know exactly the situation that's going on. It could be a high-speed chase. So err on the side of safety. But these people aren't able to surrender to the police officer right there. So what to speak of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So it's going to take some work for some of us, but we can help the people out there. We can try to help each other, and we can try to help all the souls out there. And by chanting the Maha Mantra and by giving them some of our realizations and by showing them some of the Vedic literatures that Srila Prabhupada and the great acharyas have written by Transcendental Book Distribution. So chapters 7 through 12 here in the Gita are concerned with Krishna himself and the jiva's relationship with him. And there's the apara prakriti, which is matter and inferior, which includes the 8 material elements. And then there's para prakriti, which is spirit and superior, and that even includes the jivas. Yeah. So any topics for discussion? Anyone has any comments, or maybe a question? Yes, Jagannath Prabhu.
Krishna. I just want to make a comment and ask a question. Is that okay?
Oh, of course.
Okay. I was liking what you said about how the Gyanis are not most loved, but most appreciated by the Supreme. I was just thinking about how this is a movement of appreciation, and there were some, yeah. Anyway, so I was just appreciating that, um, that that this movement is a what's it called? A movement of appreciation. And then my question is, why do we think these atheistic thoughts, even if we don't want to?
Yeah,
because you're speaking on like, I think you're speaking on like, think just our way of thinking. So I'm wondering, like, we have atheistic thoughts, and I'm wondering, like, why is that? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question. As we're trying to purify ourselves, Krishna might throw us a thought that we, because he knows we need more purification, and nothing is happening that he doesn't want. So we have to know that it's, we can say thank you for this purification opportunity. But also I know that I'm growing. I know I'm getting more purified. I know that these thoughts are going away, whether it's an impure thought or an atheistic thought. It could be a leftover thought from a previous life, or it could be an impression that registered in a weird way, or these anarthas, these unwanted things. And it's like we're getting stronger. We're getting these muscles of bhakti, and so we're able to control, or know how to filter our thoughts, or know how to have a lockbox where I've got a lockbox, and these thoughts aren't allowed in. And so we're trying to get muscles and trying to get a stronger lockbox. And I've sometimes, I'm up there sometimes playing music, and I get like a negative thought about another musician on stage out of the blue for no reason. I'm thinking, where did that come from? That's not, that's not me. And it's a sign sometimes of a wandering mind that's not dialed in. It's a sign that maybe we didn't read enough Vedic literature that day, because that's gonna help train us. We need that every day, a little bit of training. The way a child is forced to go to school at first, but then eventually the child can fall in love with scholastic endeavors the way that we have. And we're not being forced to be here. Obviously, we love the learning process now, though. But even in school, we may not have always liked it, or we may have seen some other people that didn't like it, and we may have falsely think, oh, maybe I want to be like them, or maybe I want to hide my intelligence, or so there's so many different impressions, so many different choices in life, so we've made some bad choices, we've made some good choices, and so we're continuing to work on making better and better choices, and it's a learning process. So we've been learning our whole lives, and getting impressions, and luckily we came in contact with a devotee, and fell in love with Krishna consciousness. And it's the magic is in the chanting, and that purifying ourselves. And so it's, if you have a thought, you can have a reaction. How are you going to react to the negative thought? I'm going to chant some mantras. I'm going to chant a few Maha mantras. I'm going to chant around, or maybe if my rounds aren't done, this thought came up, but my rounds weren't done that day, or I was trying to, the rounds had to be finished later in the day, which happens because we're busy. But we know sometimes that it feels great to get them done as early as possible. So we're working on that. We're working on juggling everything, and having good days and serving the Lord in that way. And so those are just a few thoughts. But well, I guess that's about all the time we have. So. Bhagavad-gita as it is, ki jai, Srila Prabhupada, ki jai, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.